Grant Reviewer Anonymous. So I was asked to give a grant reviewer's perspective. I was asked particularly to things like what are grant reviewers looking for, what makes a grant stand out, what's the first impressions. We've already done an hour of first impression work, which is really essential. So I think most of what I was going to say has been sensibly already presented by the first two speakers. What makes a winning grant? So give a bit of context, so doing a bit of a Mick thing here. Why? Well, I've won 70 grants since 2000. I've got a whole bunch more before that. And of 38 of them, I am the principal investigator on. And they run from a couple of £100,000 to 5 million, that kind of order of things. So I'm quite good at writing grants. I think that was one of the reasons I was asked, from all different places. And I found some logos to show you. I also review lots of grants for lots of different organisations. And here's a logo cloud of organisations that I've reviewed grants for. You'll notice, the astute Americans amongst you, that I have not reviewed for the National Institute of Health or the NSF, because they always send the request for reviews at the very last minute, and it's a huge amount of work, and you can hardly ever get it done in time. So I've never actually reviewed for those guys. But I think what I'm going to say is pretty well in common with many others. So there is actually a really neat 10 simple rules for getting grants, 10 simple rules article, computational biology. For those of you who haven't looked at it, please look at it. It's one of the early ones of Phil Bourne's series in this regard. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide the talk now into a couple of sections. The first section is a plea for empathy, so you understand the process a bit. And the second is then 6 points I just want to raise. So I'm not actually going to go through the details of individual programs and how they do grants and so on, and the processes. You can look that up yourself. But this is understanding what happens when somebody like me gets a grant and they've got to review it. So here's the context. Understanding the process, the purpose of the grants, which is a bit different. The purpose of grant reviewing is a bit different to paper reviewing, because our prime purpose is ranking against quota. That's what we're having to do. We're having to rank you in order then to decide which of these papers, which one of these grants will go and get the money, and there's only a certain amount of quota. Journals don't tend to have intellectual quota, and grant reviews panels have financial quotas. So it's a bit different. So understanding the people and the situation, and empathy, folks. Empathy is the key thing. So, a grant reviewer's perspective. You may get, so this is me with this bald head, with a pile of grants to review. Often you're going to get grants come in blocks, so you're reviewing for a grant call where you're going to have a whole bunch to review, because the calls come out, people are going to submit to that call, and then you're reviewing a whole bunch of them. Or you may get one review to do, or 2 or 3 reviews in isolation because of the nature of the call, because they're grants that are just coming in. That actually makes a difference, because if you're reviewing a whole bunch on block, you're already applying a kind of ranking idea. You're doing a comparative idea. If you're doing one in isolation, you aren't doing the comparison. You're just doing you're just doing it as it stands, and then sending in to the process. So that's something to think about, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the ranking issue in a minute. You could be, so I could be doing a review, and just been called out to do this review. I write the review and I send it into the process, and that's it. Or I could be part of a panel. So this is the European Research Council PE6 Advanced Grants Awards panel in 2013, and I'm sure you've memorized that now. And there's me and my mates who sat for these. This is a prestigious award. These are the European Research Council Awards to the top scientists in the field in computer science, and their personal kind of fellowships of up to 4 million euro. So these are big deals, 3 to 4 million euro. And this grant reviewing process takes about 14 days solid for each one of these people, right? So this took 14 days of my life to just do this one panel. So this is a big deal, complicated deal. And we all stuck together, we're all mates. So one of the things we're going to be doing is we're going to review these proposals, and then we're going to debate. So there's a lot of active debating. Now, that particular award, that was computer science across the board. So I'm a knowledge person. I do semantic web and bioinformatics, but other people do formal methods. Other people do nanotechnology. They're all doing different things. So we actually have specialists and generalists. And it's important when you're writing a grant to think, as we said earlier, who's your audience? Who's going to be reviewing it? Is it generalist who's sitting on the panel, or is it the expert who's doing the expert review? I'll go into that a little bit more because you're going to have a mixture. And is it multidisciplinary? Now, many of you are informaticians, you're bioinformaticians. There's a damn good chance there's only one bioinformatician on the panel. And all the rest, unless it's a specialist call, are actually biologists or something else. So you're going to have to remember that not everybody knows what, I know, we had one earlier, didn't we, what sequence alignment was, because they're actually from a different field. And it's a very extreme place in that case with the computer science panel, because we had radically different people. So one of the prime reasons people failed to get their grant was because they didn't explain what it was they were trying to do and why, right? In a clear kind of way to somebody who was an expert computer scientist but wasn't an expert in their field. So this is an important thing, and you can translate that to your own field. So multidisciplinary research is particularly tricky because you've got everybody looking at different aspects, right? But everybody thinks they're only seeing their bit, and you've got to show them how all of this fits together, assuming that some of the reviewers aren't particularly deep in your field. So this means that you're often doing two things. You're comparing, we are comparing apples and oranges when we're doing these reviews, or we're comparing lots of apples that look very similar, right? So both are difficult, right? So if I'm comparing apples and oranges, I've got to somehow decide, why should I choose this proposal over another one to go forward in the ranking for the reviews? Or I've got a whole bunch that look more or less the same. It's another form of machine learning, game theory, algorithm to do some sort of clever stuff. How am I going to distinguish between that and the other 20 I'm using game theory, machine learning, algorithms to do clever stuff? So you have to think both cases when you're writing your grant. Because this is the kind of result, which is the big blue. This is from the National Institute of Health. The big blue is the submissions, and the dark blue is the awards, right? Big number, little number. So what you're trying to do is get yourself onto the table, get yourself positively reviewed, and get yourself positively ranked. That's what we're trying to do. So what happens? So this is what I think most people assume. A grant request goes in, magic, miracle occurs, yes, no. It's a bit more detailed than that. There's a few kind of people interacting in this magic. Program managers, they're the ones who are actually managing the grant process. Reviewers, introducing members, and panelists are some that immediately come to mind. So here's a little sketch of a kind of typical grant reviewing process. So you send in the grant, it goes to potentially some panelists, maybe. So in the European Research Council one I gave the example of, the grants first went to a panel. the panel reviewed an abstract of the grant, a 5-page abstract of the grant, and then made a sift to go forward to actually then assign the expert reviewers. So you had a sift stage, and you could be rejected at the sift stage. So that means understand when you're putting in your grant, is there a sift stage? Because if there is, what is it they are sifting on? Because there's no point in writing a glorious large grant that actually is only going to be sifted on the first 5 pages, or actually in this case it was a separate kind of section, because they're never going to see it. They're only going to see the bit that they're sifting on. Right? So that's the first thing to know, understand that process. But you may just have one where the grant goes in and then it's allocated reviewers immediately by program managers. Again, goes out to reviewers, expert reviewers. The expert reviews will be returned to, potentially returned, depends, to you to rebut. And again, if you have a rebuttal process, use the rebuttal process and be polite about the rebuttals. Don't say the reviewers are all assholes. That doesn't tell you about the video. I shouldn't have said that word. Don't say that the reviewers are misguided. You have to be factual, be clear, and don't be rude if at all possible. Then all the reviews and the rebuttals then go into, typically for the panel stage, the introducing member. Is everybody familiar with the notion of an introducing member? Okay, so this typically happens on these panel based reviewing. You've got stacks of grants to allocate to rank. So, and you can't expect everybody to read everything. So what you have is an introducing member. That's somebody who's assigned, whose job is to really have read the proposal, to really have read the reviews, to really have read the rebuttal, and to prepare an introduction to it. And you'll have, typically you can have, for example, a couple of introducing members. So I sit on several from the Royal Society in the UK, which have 2 introducing members for each proposal. And it's the introducing members who are going to then explain to the panelists their potential preliminary scores for this grant. So helping the introducing member to write their reports, just like helping the reviewers to write their reports, is a really good idea. So understanding what are they going to have to say. So what's their pitch? Because they're going to pitch for you. So you really have to be clear about your pitch so they can write their pitch. Then it goes to panel, and then there's this ranking, activity and decisions. So know your criteria. So these guys, all these guys and girls, well, guys means the same, both, I'm using the word guys to mean women and men. I've just done unconscious bias training. So, nearly got away with that. Know what your criteria are, and it's different for different kinds of grants. So these are screenshots of the online form used in the research councils in the UK for submitting reviews. And you can see the different document sections. It depends on what kind of proposal it is. Is it an infrastructure proposal? So the thing at the far end is an infrastructure proposal, an informatics proposal. So what's the strategic relevance of it? Is there a need for this resource? Is it unique? How are you going to manage it? Is it value for money? What is its social and economic impact? Is it timely? I mean, what we're particularly interested in is, will you be able to sustain it after you've done it? Whereas others, for example, this middle one is to do with a fellowship. What's the ability of the applicant to deliver? What's the research vision? Do they have leadership potential? Because a fellow is about building up your career. It's a fellowship, career fellowship. So your leadership potential is really important. What are the resources and how do they plan to manage the resources? So for every criteria, the reviewer is having to write a section in the review form, and the introducing member is having to summarise and rank against them. So don't ignore the different sections. So I've read loads of grants where they really did a whole ton of stuff about the excellence of a science and then completely failed to tell me how they were going to do it, or what the value for money was, or was it important to anybody. So each one of these criteria counts. So you need to do all of them, so understand them, and say, as you're writing the section, think, how am I going to answer these questions reading my grant? How easy is it to do? And that's basically who, what, when, where, how, and particularly the how. I've read lots and lots of proposals where they really got me excited, but I had no idea how they were going to do it. Right? And that doesn't give you confidence that they can actually do it. So the how. There's also a big importance, you probably saw this from a recent Nature news, on impact. So impact is becoming particularly important. So Mick talked about earlier today, why are you doing this? Just saying, I've got some great idea, please give me some money so I can go and do it, isn't really going to run. You need to know why you're going to do it. Is it going to have any impact on anybody? Particularly, is it going to have any impact on perhaps the mission of the funding council or the agency that you are applying to? So it would be a good idea to at least have some working knowledge of the strategic delivery plan of the council that you're writing your grant for, or what the call actually wants to hear. Because in the end, what we're going to do is rank. So these are a couple of pictures. The far end one is the scoring for a research council in the UK, which basically says 6 exceptional funded, 1 unfundable. What you want is a pack of 6s. So what you want is each reviewer to have got you a whole bunch of 6s, so that when you go, your introducing member goes into panel, they can say, look, good set of 6s here. Or if you're being interviewed by a panel, which is another grant reviewing process. I didn't talk about that. So the panel could be an interviewing panel as well. You want to have a good solid collection of high-ranked reviews. And it's the same, this one here is from the NIH again. So it's again, what's the score? Is it going to be high, medium, low? And this is extremely useful. I'll make these slides available. Things like applications are addressing a problem of high importance and interest in the field, may have some or no weaknesses. That's your top ranking. Through to applications may be addressing a low problem, so a problem of low importance, but with no weaknesses in it, which is like it's dull. Nobody wants to do this. Or it might be high importance, but it has weaknesses. So this is the thing you're trying to distinguish. Okay, now putting that context to one side, where have I, me, the reviewer, where have I reviewed proposals? I've reviewed proposals in my office. So this is a picture of my office, which Terry knows, and it is that bad, actually. It is really, really messy. Slightly embarrassed. I've reviewed in hotel rooms. I've reviewed in hotel lobbies. I've reviewed in cafes, because we're doing this while we're doing our other jobs. I've reviewed on planes. I've reviewed on trains, and one particularly stressful effort I reviewed during a very boring Blackburn Rovers play Leeds football match at Blackburn Rovers. For those of you who know Blackburn Rovers, it's a middle tier football club. But I reviewed a grant in the stand during the draw. Right? It was desperate, right? I had a pile of these to do. This tells you something about the attention span and the atmosphere of where you are with the reviewing. it means that you're not always able to get online, for example. So whether things are self-contained or not is actually quite important. So what you want to do is grab the reviewer. So given this context, and you'll think, oh my God, this reviewer is now reviewing my grant while at a football match. Here's my 6 things to think about. So think about the reviewer. And I have seen the enemy, and it is us. So the reviewer is you. It's somebody like you. When I'm having my grants reviewed, it's me, somebody like me, reviewing them. So this is why you need to think about, the empathy aspect. Think about the situation of the reviewer, their background. Will they have the same background as you or not? If it's going into a call where you're an informatician associated with a life science, a biology project, there's a good chance it'll be a biologist reviewing it and not an informatician. So explain what the informatics is about. What's the call criteria? What's the review form? Because they've got to merge those together. They've got to fill out this form. Help them fill out the form, folks. The time they've got, the number of proposals they're ploughing them through. Try not to make them work harder than necessary and get all cross and frustrated, because they've got to filter, they've got to write a report, they've got to judge, and they've got to rank, right? So help them. The writing, it's not an essay. It's a grant proposal. You've got to sell on the first page. It's what Mick was telling you about earlier. What is your pitch? And I'd actually written before I even heard him talk, pyramid writing, which means you do the summary of everything in the top, and then you do some more detail, and then you do some more detail. So you don't sort of wait. It's not a detective story. I've read lots of proposals where a detective story that at the end I'm supposed to have figured out who done it. And no, I don't want to come to the end and say, aha, now we know how they're going to do it. Now I want to be told in the first page, right? I want a spoiler. I want a summary. I want a plot summary right at the beginning, because we're going to, if I've got a ton of these, I'm scanning them because I'm going to triage out, clearly out in, really got to deal detail. Okay, these ones I've got to focus on because they are in the middle tier. And you don't want to be triaged out, right? So you need to really bear that in mind. Match up with the criteria. You saw the criteria, so make sure that it's easy in your proposal to match the criteria in the review, in your proposal. Highlight the contribution, restate key points if necessary. Break the fourth wall. The fourth wall is where if in a TV show, they talk directly to camera. So it's a reviewer reviewing it, so talk directly to the reviewer. Say, this is quite difficult to explain. Say, this is difficult to explain. Right? So talk to them, because you don't have to assume that there is no human being who's receiving this. And all the bits matter. If there's a pathways to impact document to put in, so you have to describe your pathway to the impact of your proposal, then take it seriously. If there's a data management plan, take it seriously. Don't miss out bits. So think about the format and the structure, bullets, diagrams, signposts. Be concise, clear, self-contained, explicit. Because muddled writing will be equivalent to a muddled idea. Because I can't tell the difference from a muddled writing to a muddled idea. It could be completely clear writing of a very muddled idea. I don't know, because it's just muddled. And if it's just muddled, I'll just go there. And in fact, this is a proposal I read recently, which made 2 major institutes in the United Kingdom put together a proposal, and I'm on the panel, and it was like this, which is a Where's Wally picture. Okay, where's Wally? It took me 5 hours to work out what they were actually trying to tell me. And I wasn't the only one. The other 6 reviewers for this, all of us had the same problem. Right? So by the end of it, how do you think we felt? Like, they can't even tell us how they want to have these multiple millions of pounds spent. Just give us the money. It took us 5 hours each to try and figure out what is it they actually want to do. So that didn't go well. So then the third thing is the content. Convince me about that with purpose, the aims, the objectives, the expected outcome and the impact. What's the scope? So ambitious, yes, but not unrealistic, particularly with respect to resources and collaborators. Do you have the resources to do this? And if you don't have all the skills, do you have the collaborators to provide the skills and the resources needed? What's the contribution? How will you do it? What's the appropriate background to make me think you can do it? Do you have any preliminary results? And how will you recognize success? And again, this goes back to something that Mick said, be specific, give examples, give stories, give evidence. Don't just say things that are general. And assume nothing. Will the reviewers spot the contribution or the novelty, particularly if they're slightly out of field? Will they understand the balance and significance? Tell them. Tell them what the balance is. Tell them what the significance is. So particularly the winning grants that do well are the ones that kind of have some really good fundamentals, some really good practice, and a clear application. Or it doesn't have to be applied, but you can see a direction. You could see where this might apply, might be translated. And so particularly the big grants that really do well have this kind of three prongs associated with them. The fourth one, and I put this in because of many of you are from bioinformatics. There will be bioinformatics aspects associated with your proposals. So do you have the capability and capacity? So if you're producing data, where's your data management plan? If you're producing software, where's your software management plan? If you have infrastructure, what's the plan for it? I've read many proposals that plan to produce some software, and then what? Where's it going to go? Is it going to be open source? Are you going to stick it on GitHub and claim that is now open and freely available? No, it's just stuck on GitHub. There's no, how are you going to build a community around it if that's the purpose of the grant? Do you have actually the server capacity to run the software? Did you put that in the grant? Or can you convince me where it will be? Will there be backup? Things like this, we wanted to be able to see, is there some real evidence that you kind of know what you're doing? The track record, again, this goes to what Mick said before. Be specific to the proposal. Why you? Why these collaborators? Or are they just decoration? Did you just stick a few collaborators on because they sounded like big names and they wrote letters of support for you? Letters of support without real contribution are pretty useless, actually. And in fact, if you just collect lots of letters of support, which are just, this is a very good person and they deserve, you'll really piss everybody off, right? So they have to be really contributing. Why these? What role will they play, and will they play a role? But particularly why not general CV? Don't just put a general CV, a tailored CV, a tailored track record to this proposal. Why? That you will then tie in the proposal to your track record. Everything ties together. Having different bits is really irritating. What you want is everything to be tied together. And your impact, as Mick was saying before, is not just publications. Do you have a track record? If it's infrastructure proposal, do you have a track record in delivering infrastructure? Where's your GitHub submissions, for example, contributions? How will you do you have a history of making an impact? If it's a fellowship, do you have a track record in developing researchers and a group around you? So that kind of thing. And then finally, impact. Now, impact is really important. I can talking about it quite a bit, because impact is in the end something that's going to make the proposal rank higher. So if you've got an outstanding proposal, it's really good research, really good science, and I've got 50 of them, like that, and I can fund 5. Now, what am I going to do? We're going to have to choose some criteria, because they're all apples, they're all looking the same. So why rank one above the other? But because of the benefits that may ensue. The benefits to you, perhaps, if it's a fellowship. The benefits to science, that it's important. So state the significance right up front and relate to the mission of the core and to the agency. And be specific. Try to be specific. Don't say, this is going to cure cancer. That's not specific, right? Be quite specific. These impacts are not necessarily economic. They could be social, they could be personal. But try to think, why am I doing this? Because why should you be interested in me? It's exactly what Mick was talking about. Why should you be interested in this proposal? Why is this important? Okay, so here's one, and I'm a computer scientist, so I started counting from 0, obviously. Understand the context. So understand who it is who's doing the reviewing. Remember the reviewer, they are you. So imagine what you would do if you were reviewing this proposal. Share it amongst your colleagues to have a bash at that as well. That means also, if at all possible, get onto review panels if you can, because you will learn from the experience. The writing, structure the writing. Don't write long, dense essays. The content is all about convincing me that you know what you're doing and why it's important. Resources, be quite clear about your resources. Often grants fall down on the resources. They do a great job on the science, and then they forget to tell me the method or the methodology or the resources or the skills that they need. The track record for that particular proposal and the impact it will make. If you do all of that, you've got a damn good chance of getting a grant. Okay, so I hope that was helpful, and I'm ready to take any questions.
Thank you so much. If you allow us to go into coffee, few minutes.
Oh,
there's
sorry.
Time, that's all right. There's time for Tony.
So you said we need to help you as a reviewer,
Yes.
us as a reviewer, fill out this form.
Yeah.
Why, at least recently, grant administrators, they don't provide you the boxes that the reviewers will be getting. So you need to get this out of the form.
You'd be surprised at it's the power of Google. Actually, nearly always you can find the review forms. But you can also predict from the call, and you can also, you looked at those screenshots, they all looked similar, right? So they're all just variations on a theme. What's the scientific excellence? What was the importance? What was the impact? How are they managing it? So you can kind of make your own little template. Right, and so what happens is I've got to write down now what the scientific impact is of this proposal, and I have my judgment. But if you've said the scientific impact of this proposal is this and this and this, and I've got 25 of these to review in a week, I'm going to think, well, that's quite handy. I wonder if I agree with him, right? Whereas if you don't tell me anywhere what the scientific impact is, I've got to figure it out. Right? So the more you can help, the better. And it helps you with your thinking, because those proposals that really think about what am I trying to convey are the proposals that are really well written and really give the sense of that the person is well organised and could actually deliver this. Because if a muddled grant that doesn't really convey this suggests a muddled thinker, suggests a muddled organisation, then you think, well, will they actually be able to deliver this?
So another piece of advice maybe is to also go to most universities and institutes. They have dedicated centers, grant centers, or valorization. We have a valorization center that helps people write these grants, and they know these tick boxes. They can review also the grant before you submit it. And maybe that's another to put on the slide.
Oh,
number
yeah,
7 is to
yeah.
Send it out to your friends, colleagues, grandmother.
Yeah.
whatever.
I just did this from my point of view as a reviewer, completely selfish, completely egocentric viewpoint, which is what I see when I'm trying to look for it. But absolutely, send them out. Don't send them to your grandmother, actually. I would, unless your grandmother is a leading researcher in the field, which is quite possible, but yes.
How many preliminary results should you put into your grant?
Enough to convince that you know that what you that you can deliver the grant. That's it.
And if I realize you have already done pretty much, so
Then you have to use your judgment. So you need to have enough. I know exactly where you're going, because there's a whole kind of some set of grants where, frankly, you have to have done it all before you start, before you can actually deliver. So you're basically asking for money retrospectively. Then you have to be shrewd enough in order to show that the approach, the method is promising, but clearly you need more experimental opportunity. You need more research that has to be undertaken, and the fact you've already done it, whatever. But so you have to be a bit shrewd about that, and it depends on the grant, and depends on what you're doing. Depends if it's wet lab or informatics.
So I've received an NSF, and I found that kind of similar to this question. Sometimes it's easier to find the questions like the boxes that you have to kind of talk
The exam questions.
The exam questions that you, yeah. So you can kind of just say, this is my goal, this is whatever. But you made a statement about the fact that, a generalization, I guess, that many might not be bioinformaticians.
Yeah.
So at that point, when you're trying to attract a reviewer or speak to the reviewer, is it appropriate to email them and just say,
No.
I'm going to be reviewing
No.
kinds of reviewers will
You were going to email the reviewer, you said.
No, just.
Oh, okay.
Like,
Okay.
NSF or whoever, what kinds of reviewers will there be? Because specifically at NSF, you have literally different deadlines.
Yes.
What you're gonna do, and in bioinformatics, when I submitted mine, I called them and I was like, okay, so my proposal has these three things. Should I do a life science or computer
Right,
science?
okay, no, I see what you mean. So I thought you were going to say, should I email the reviewers? I'm thinking, oh my God, no, don't do that. Well, you won't know who they are, most likely anyway. No, absolutely, the program manager. So one of the people I put as a player was the program manager. And the program manager or the program officer or whoever it is, whatever their title is your friend. So you call them. Ask them which call should I be going into, because I didn't talk about all the different calls and things. I just talked about it from the grant reviewers situation perspective. Yes, absolutely. Speak to the organisation, get their advice, get the inside skinny on it. Absolutely. Particularly for you also need, say again. So in the UK, for example, our researcher councils publish who sits on the committees, right? So you can see the past committee memberships, and from that you can probably deduce the next committee memberships. So you can kind of see what is the background of the committees that are being assembled for these kinds of grants. So it may not be the same people, but you get the drift. And that will be worth doing a little bit of work on as well, if you're really unsure about your proposal, how it will be received.
Let's go for one more short question. Yeah?
Have you got any tips for how we can write about the risks associated with the grant in an honest and good way that's not going to turn off the review?
Actually, risks are typically don't turn off reviewers. Risks actually give you a sense of this person's really thought about what they're doing, and they recognise risks. They have a risk register, and they've got an approach to mitigate the risk. Well, that's good, because that suggests that they've really thought through the proposal. And proposals where you have a lot of blue sky stuff, where actually it's risky, but you also have contributions that are less risky, so that the proposal will deliver a set of results as it exists, as it continues, so that you'll get some outputs, because there's this lower risk stuff, but you'll get some potentially great outputs, but it's much higher risk. This kind of risk, high risk, high gain balance is something that, for example, in many European grants is an explicit criteria that we look for in the European research grants that I mentioned. There is a what is the risk to gain potential, and actually with those we were looking for really high risk, really high gain. So so that's a great idea, and I recommend it.
So thanks. Let's close this session and hope to see you again 5 to 4. Okay.